everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Liana. Today, can we talk a little bit about the hypocritical logic behind all these people crying about the fairness or lack of fairness behind trans women competing in sports? Now, there are so many different levels to this, but here are just a few I want to talk about. If a cisgender woman is leagues ahead of all other women, she's congratulated for this. That is considered fair and acceptable. She's considered to have natural talents and should and will be celebrated for these gifts. If a cisgender man is leagues ahead of all the other men, that too is considered fair, down to natural talent and ability, and should be celebrated. Now here is where things take a little bit of a turn. Trans men can compete against other men because they're at a natural disadvantage. And that is also fair. Are we following this yet? That's also fair? If and when they win, it's considered a real accomplishment. And if they lose, oh well, it was bound to happen. I'm not following this. Yet, if a transgender woman is leagues ahead of other women, that's not fair. She's got a natural advantage. And she should both be shamed and ashamed. At the same time, if she loses, that's an obvious sign that she threw the match. Wait a minute. If she loses, that's an obvious sign that she threw the match? Aren't these the same people who are the ones who think that people are transitioning just to get a better shot at winning? Just to get a better shot at having an advantage in the first place? That makes no sense. Putting aside the fact that no one is going through the process of transitioning just to fool anyone, why transition just to supposedly get an easy advantage and then lose? It almost seems like regardless of performance, transgender women can't win. The reason people like myself so often like to refer to Michael Phelps in these scenarios is because he is the perfect example of having a biological advantage. Not only is he not penalized for this, he is one of the most highly decorated Olympians of all time. He's highly celebrated. His body is quite literally made for swimming. It's unlike most bodies you will ever see in or outside of a pool. He's got a much larger wingspan than most human beings. It's roughly 3 inches longer than his body height. He's 6'4" and his wingspan is 6'7". Most human beings have a wingspan of their same height. This puts his upper body at the same physical build of someone who's around 6'8". He has very large feet, roughly size 14, which help propel him through the water with the length of his arms. But perhaps most interestingly of all, he naturally produces approximately half of the lactic acid that most human beings produce, which means his muscles do not cramp or get tired the same way everybody else's does. Michael Phelps having these natural advantages, yet also being one of the most decorated Olympians of all time, prove that his existing physical body and biological advantages are not considered unfair. They are rewarded. If it isn't unfair for Michael Phelps to swim in his natural body with all of the advantages it comes with, a body and advantages that no other cisgender swimmer has, why is it unfair for transgender women to compete in any sport with a body that has undergone rigorous hormone therapy to adhere to a very strict set of guidelines and rules? Bone density, muscle mass, and testosterone levels don't just change over the course of hormone therapy, they also vary extremely widely within gender categories. Outside of the previous example of Michael Phelps, which is one example of how different bodies can be within the gendered categories of any given sport, cisgender women's bodies also vary just as much. Typically, one of the biggest arguments against trans women competing in women's sports is the advantage of higher testosterone. Aside from the fact that hormone replacement therapy lowers this, among other ways it creates changes in the body, the truth is that there are many cisgender women whose testosterone levels are already naturally higher than the current set guidelines. Christine Mboma Beatrice Massalingi and Caster Semenya are just 3 recent examples of cisgender women who have been barred from competing due to their naturally higher levels of testosterone. They're also all Black women, and they're all highly talented runners. In order for these highly talented Black athletes to be allowed to run, they must take testosterone suppressants. And yet no one asked Michael Phelps to do anything about his naturally occurring and performance-enhancing levels of lactic acid. I also don't see any of these same people who are worried about the level of fairness in women's sports stepping up to stop any of this unfairness from happening. Probably because these people don't actually care about women's sports until it's time to shit all over trans women. Needless to say, it's a slippery slope to police people's bodies, but especially on the grounds of what is considered fair, because of who gets to dictate what is fair in our society. Caster herself recently spoke about this on her Twitter, and here's what she had to say.
So according to World Athletics and its members, I'm a male when it comes to 400 meter, 800 meter, 1500 meter, and 1600 meter, then a female in 100 meter, 200 meter, and long distance events. What kind of a fool would do that?
Now remember, those strict rules and guidelines I mentioned earlier are a good example of this. A trans person must have been on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for at least 1 full year, soon to be changed to 3 full years, and must be able to prove to a panel of health experts that there is no biological advantage. Yet we already have proof that biological advantages exist among elite athletes, and cisgender athletes are not asked to prove this in the same way that trans athletes are, because their bodies are not deemed the other and the outlier by society. The other most common concern regarding fairness of trans women in sports is that trans women are already crudely outclassing cisgender women, and people usually have their own examples prepared for this, such as the following. What about trans woman MMA fighter Fallon Fox? Didn't she crush the cisgender woman's skull during a match? No. Let's get this perfectly straight. MMA, mixed martial arts, is a brutal sport. Injuries are incredibly common, including orbital bone fractures, which is what actually happened. These happen in fights between cisgender men and between cisgender women on an almost monthly basis at the top levels of competition, yet this is never ruled as an unfair fight. Incidentally, Fallon then went on to lose in a total knockout to a cisgender woman in her 4th fight. Well, how about Leah Thomas, who went from 554th place in men's swimming to suddenly smashing women's swimming records? Again, that's actually not true if you look at the proper numbers. Leah was ranked 554th in 200 meter freestyle out of a possible 3,800 swimmers. But she was also 65th in the 500 meter freestyle and 32nd in the 1,650 freestyle. She was a very excellent swimmer before and is a very excellent swimmer now. She recently won her first NCAA 500 meter freestyle in women's swimming, but her times have not been records. Both her pre- and post-transition fastest swim times fall short of quite a few records, including those of cisgender women swimmers, including Katie Ledecky and Missy Franklin. So if Katie Ledecky, a cisgender athlete, is celebrated for lapping other women, which I've frequently seen her do, why is Leah Thomas booed from even entering the pool? Why do we lift up cis women athletes' accomplishments, but when a trans woman does even remotely well, we condemn her for dominating even when that's not even the case? Why do we have to put down the accomplishments of trans women athletes just to make some people feel better? And why is it that with so few examples, some people seem to be able to pull out of their ass? Trans women are still seen as this giant threat to women's sports. If someone is outraged over the unfairness of cis women having a disadvantage, why be fine with and even gleeful about the same supposed disadvantage affecting trans men? At what point do we admit that this actually doesn't have anything to do with fairness or unfairness? Sports, by their nature, are not fair. They are a competition. Some people are better and some people are worse. If we stop letting some people compete because of different height, weight, bone density, muscle mass, and hormone levels, then a lot of cisgender athletes simply have to go too. And if you think that sounds extreme, congrats, you're starting to hear how ridiculous this all sounds. Trans women deserve to play in women's sports. Get over it. That's my video for today. I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe and well, and I hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.